one that has it. The flowers. The flowers don't show up,
Hours.
which is weird. But anyway, we can get started here into high school sports. All right, we are getting ready for week 4 as we start digging for wisdom. Everybody's just about in district play now, except for some of these outskirt districts that got the 5 or 6 teams in there. That's Professor Diggs over there. I'm the Wizard. We are talking DFW football, and we had another solid week where things that we thought were going to happen didn't happen, and things that we did think were happening did happen. So we don't know what the heck's going on. But that's why you listen to us, because so you can either challenge us, we didn't do it right, or say, hey, here's your flowers from the audience. Diggs, what did you see last week that either made your head scratch or made you proud that you picked it ahead of time?
Definitely a lot of things that I did not understand or figure out. It's what I kind of call some dramatic shifts. And I think the first thing that I absolutely did not see coming was Skyline beating Crowley. And not only Skyline beating Crowley, but Skyline absolutely destroying Crowley, 31-0. That's their second shutout on the year. We're going to see Skyline ranked in my rankings this week. It's going to be at the bottom, but this is the first time I think Skyline has been ranked since Foxes were going across fields at SMU. I mean, it's been a while since we've got a chance to see them.
Yeah, and what stuck out for me was, and I agree with you on Skyline, shutting them out like that is wild, but Red Oak, I don't know what to make of Red Oak. I don't know what's going on. I had threw my hands up on Red Oak. Yeah, they went to one quarterback, but still to beat a Cedar Hill team without Taz Williams and beat the pants out of them like Skyline did to Crowley, that's got me scratching my head.
What we told you, though, Ward, about the 2 quarterback system, it has been something we have talked about consistently here on the Digging for Wisdom podcast. When you got 2 quarterbacks, you've got none. And from what I understand, the other quarterback went back to Arkansas, so we just have 1 quarterback now. And all of a sudden, we have a galvanized team. We've got a team that's rallying around it. We have a team with a vision. We saw the same exact thing happen with Lancaster last year, Ward. I mean, they got beat and mauled by McKinney North, and by the end of the year, they're in the 4th round of the playoffs, 1 point away from making it to the state semifinal. So I absolutely think that moving to 1 quarterback has a big galvanizing effect on the team, on the community, on the coaching staff. It's like you know what you're going to do. You can game plan instead of trying to make everybody happy. And I was thinking about it, Ward, and I think coaches have what we call groupthink a little bit at times, a psychology term, and that's just where they get in each other's office and they convince themselves they're right about these things. And I think it comes from a good place, and that's what I really wanted to highlight here is that you've got 2 talented quarterbacks on your team. Your heart goes out. It happened last year with Lancaster. I believe you had an interview or something with Leon Paul. He was like, "We got 2 quarterbacks. We got to play them. I got to get tape on them. I'm doing it for the kids." And that to me, big heart. I love that, but it does not help a team. You have never seen a state championship team with 2 quarterbacks. And Jaquavius Pipkin had 150 yards last week, ruining my fantasy week that we're going to talk about. So obviously it's worked out for him. Carter Jones, it's worked out for him. So sometimes it works out better for the team if somebody has to kind of take a step back, even though that might not have been their preferred position. And I think at Red Oak, you saw this galvanizing force, and Cedar Hill was unfortunately the benefactors of that galvanizing force, or the lack of benefacting on that. Now all of a sudden, Cedar Hill is in complete disarray. It's like Red Oak was in disarray, Cedar Hill was in disarray, and this week, what has Cedar Hill got? They got Skyline, and Skyline had one of these dramatic shifts. So we got a positive dramatic shift and a negative dramatic shift, and this week, and we'll talk about it here when we get to the picks. We'll find out what's going to happen when they play each other. But man, that was an incredible dramatic shift. There were a couple other ones, and one of them, what we actually kind of talked about here on this podcast, because I was very pretty hesitant on Burleson Centennial. I was telling you that, there's just something about the way they were calibrating, something about the way they were playing that just made me a little bit uneasy about them. And Ennis took them out to the woodshed this past week. And that was after Ennis had a dramatic shift, because remember, Ennis just got beat by Waxahachie and then Midlothian after Midlothian got beat by Cedar Hill. All these teams are like interconnected and are dramatic shifts. So that was a pretty big one in a dramatic shift. For me, another dramatic shift was Frisco Emerson losing to Prosper Walnut Grove. I mean, we talked about it. I told you last week, Ward, that was something I could see happening. I didn't believe it would happen, but I could see it happening. And sure enough, it happened. And the way it happened was so storybook, Ward, going for 2 points, in the last couple of minutes of a game. Man, give all the credit to Prosper Walnut Grove with a freshman quarterback. You got kids older than the kids starting over there making plays for Prosper Walnut Grove. And in that district, we have complete chaos now, Ward. So that's a crazy dramatic shift, because now somebody really good is not going to probably make the playoffs. It's going to be Anna. It's going to be Frisco Emerson. Lovejoy? We don't know. And we'll talk about that when we get into the games this week. But I think a really good team now is going to be on the outside looking in, or we're going to have some sort of tiebreaker chaos. So, Ward, get your cameras ready and get your calculator ready, Ward. I know you don't like having to calculate at the same time you're filming, but we may have to do that this year. Kind of takes you back to that Justin Northwest Keller game of a few years ago, where losing is winning and winning is losing, and you win and you're losing, you storm the field, you win, you're disappointed. We could very well see that. But unfortunately for Prosper Walnut Grove, when you look at tiebreakers, +1 is like the worst tiebreaker to have. So, that's kind of what they're going to be looking at. So it could be a win that may not end up being a win if they can't come back and further capitalize on that win. And then for me, another game that I just completely misjudged and got wrong was Caddo Mills versus Sunnyvale. Sunnyvale looks good. I mean, we thought losing Nelson Peterson, they were going to have just, that they were done. But Sunnyvale is finding something right now, developing that, and they got a new coach. Coach Settle left. He went fishing. I know you want to retire and go fishing more, but you can listen to Coach Settle. He's got some good advice on how to go fishing and divorce your job. But I know you love this podcast so much. That's why they pair us together, because they don't want to get rid of you anymore. Because there is no other Wizzy anywhere.
No, can't fish.
Find a Wizzy.
Can't find a Wizzy. Can't fish. By the way, that Prosper Walnut Grove, they stole a play out of the old their brothers up north from Salina, their playbook, though. Everybody goes right and then throws back to his left for that down around the goal line. That's how they got that 2-point conversion. But, man, before we start handing out Diggs flowers, I got to give you your flowers, because those were definitely 2 games that you told us to keep an eye on. That Walnut Grove game, the Ennis game, both of them turned out to be ones that were either eye-opening or just terrific finishes. And, yes, they only got the 1 point, but what they've really pulled out of it is that kind of confidence that they can compete. And they don't have to listen to us say, okay, there's a top tier of 4 teams, and then there's another tier underneath it. Put us up in that top tier and see if we can get in there. You're right about that. And like you said, we'll talk about Lovejoy and Anna again, that I'll be at this Friday night. See what we can see out of that game, and maybe that'll tell us something about whether Walnut Grove does have a chance to get another win that they're not supposed to get. But speaking about flowers, you got something you want to toss out. Let me see here. I know you already tossed them out to Walnut Grove, but who else gets some?
We're going to give flowers to South Oak Cliff, our friends from DISD who went to Lobo Stadium. And from what I understand, it's the first time ever a Dallas ISD school has gone to Longview and won a game there. In the previous Longview iteration, I think Woodrow Wilson in 1965, I think you were filming that game, Ward, went out to Longview and won a game out there. Woodrow Wilson was just finishing up his presidency right about that time in 1965. I promise you, history coaches, I know my history. That's just a joke. It's a bad joke, but it's a joke nonetheless. But South Oak Cliff going to Dallas ISD, I think in this run, and talking to some of the coaches and some of the fans, they tend to agree with me. This ranks incredibly high up there for South Oak Cliff. I mean, it takes a lot to go out to Lobo Stadium. Is basically like Highland Park. You just don't go to Longview and win a game. And I think it's right up there with them beating Elite Aledo in the fourth round a couple of years ago. Other than a state championship game, maybe the Aledo win is the only other win in this 3-year run that gives them that. Maybe getting to the state semifinals, maybe beating Argyle that for that first time might be up there. But this is a huge win for South Oak Cliff, especially the way they did it with offense, and they had some defensive lapses. Carter Kopecki had a great game for South Oak Cliff. So South Oak Cliff, even though you've been my number one team and I picked you to win this game, it still takes a little bit of moxie to go out there and do it. You get my flowers, South Oak Cliff. Proud of you, proud of that community. You earned it, and I'm happy to see it.
What about a game that you were at, Plano East against Princeton? You were ready to throw some flowers out, but maybe not to the team I think you are going to.
Yeah, I'm going to throw some flowers to Princeton because they got. I joked last week they had a quarterback named Flowers. I don't want him any flowers in the game. Well, he got some flowers in the game. He almost had 300 yards in the game. But just watching Princeton, I mean, this is a team that was 5A Division II last year, Ward, and getting trampled in that district every week. They're getting 60, 70 put on them, it felt like, and they just had no positive momentum. And then all of a sudden, they're districted up to 6A with the biggest schools in the state of Texas in their district. And again, I'm not making any sort of prediction that Princeton's going to make the playoffs or even win more than a game or so, but you can see development. That's one of my favorite things to see, Ward, is like, I talked about with North Mesquite about 3 years ago, that they're getting better even though you can't see it in the record. And even though Princeton, I don't know that we're going to see it in the record this year. I think a 2-8 finish is very likely for them. You see them getting better. They got skill players. They got the quarterback is really good. He's just a sophomore. I think Princeton is set up to get a little bit better each and every year. They got to work on the lines. I think they need to get the performance course out there, Ward, on the summers and bulk up these kids a little bit. But for me, I came away more impressed at what I expected to be out of Princeton. So Princeton, for flowers, you get some flowers.
You get some flowers there. You get a pair of flowers for flowers. Hey, what about, we've kind of ignored 11-6A except for the top 5, but you got some flowers in this district that don't go to those top 5 teams.
Now we're the top 6. Mesquite Horn this past week, Skyline got some flowers earlier. They're my number 6 team. Right. But Mesquite Horn beating Arlington Lamar, okay, that's nice. But they beat Arlington Lamar the same way that Saxe beat Arlington Lamar. It was a very convincing win. I thought with all of the players that went to North Forney and left with some of the coaches leaving over there, that Mesquite Horn was done for. And I think they're still a big underdog to make the playoffs. But I feel like they're showing resilience. They're feeling that little bit of an underdog mentality right now because everybody's picking against them. Their quarterback, Daughtry, is not the singer Daughtry, but Courtney Daughtry is, I'm not going to sing American Idol for us right now, but he's playing great right now. The defense is really stepping up. Mesquite Horn, I see you. I'm watching you. And this week, you have a chance to make your own statement. But for this past week, you're getting some flowers.
Getting some flowers. And then up in the Frisco ISD, a team that we haven't really talked about since they had a Mazakowski out there throwing the ball around at quarterback. Talk about the Titans.
Remember the Titans, because this week they got a pretty big win over Jackson Verowick's team that he believed was going to – he should just go ahead and buy me lunch right now because he's done. That is done. That we'll get into that next. But Frisco Centennial beating Frisco, man, that shows me they got a little bit more than we thought they did, or maybe Frisco's got a little bit less than we thought they did. But I was not expecting Frisco Centennial to be competitive in the top 6 teams in this district. But they played pretty well, and even Frisco Lebanon Trail played a little bit better than I thought they would. So Frisco Centennial for getting the win. Lebanon Trail didn't get the win. I'm going to give you some flowers. But with flowers, Ward, that means there's going to be a little bit of a shovel. And when I have to lift up Frisco Centennial, Frisco in the 9-team district, they can't make the playoffs at this point. I mean, where are their wins going to be when they've already lost to Frisco Centennial? Even if they get an upset. And that's why when you have these 9-team districts, I can premature shovel, because basically you got to win 2 at that point that you weren't expected to win. Winning 1 that you weren't expected to win is hard enough, but to win 2 and then to maybe hope that a team like Centennial loses 1 they weren't supposed to lose, that's just very hard to do. I don't know if there's injuries going on over there. I just don't know if 5-5A is just a little bit harder than they thought. But Frisco, they're done.
you're out of there. And then you had a game yesterday or last week that was on Shovel Watch between Northwest and Keller. Which one gets hit over the head with the shovel?
Well, I said winner advances to the playoff consideration. Loser goes home, and we both got it wrong, Wizzy. I thought we both thought Keller was going to win it, but Justin Northwest finds a way in those winner go home games. We were kind of joking about the game where they won and lost but won
Right.
back in the day at Keller ISD. Well, today they just flat out won, and now Keller's in that position where they got to get two they weren't expected to get. And when you're starting to look at the two you weren't expected to get, you have to get up to the Trinity and South Lake Carroll and Byron Nelson level. That's really hard. And then you got to win all the other 50-50 games with Keller Timber Creek and Northwest Eaton. Because Justin Northwest beat them, they're in a bad position. So Keller, sometimes they say turn the water tower blue. Well, you're getting the shovel, and maybe you can go up there and knock those lights out, because they're not going to be turning that water tower blue anytime soon.
Yeah, they could only put up 7 against Northwest, and then their counter marks over there at Keller Timber Creek put up 51, put up 41 in the first half against LD Bell. And if that happens to you, Dixie's going to be pulling out some garden tools.
Yeah, 4-5-8 is getting all the shovels because LD Bell losing to Timber Creek. And they had a chance. As remember, Ward, we were almost seeing a little bit of that Barbers Hill Richland magic. That game was 41-10 at one point. You talked about, at that point I just wrote them off. And then all of a sudden it's a one-score game. And they're like, we're getting that Richland Barbers Hill magic. But LD Bell couldn't finish it off. And then when you have that kind of emotional letdown, when you have such a bad first half, and then you make the adjustments and get so close, but then you can't win the game. But because you can't win the game, now you still got to, maybe even beating Trinity at this point, just like last year, may not be enough. So LD Bell, getting the early shovel from me.
He's getting dirt and thrown on him. That's bad news. Man, one team I don't think is going to get a shovel anytime soon is one of our first games that we have coming up, because they're just playing great football over there at North Crowley. They're taking on Rockwall, who survived at the big injury from Layden Locke to come out and give it to your guy. They gave it to your guy, Wilson, who he's one of your fantasy guys that came through for you. And they pulled off the win at Louisville. But now they have a short week. They're playing Thursday night against North Crowley. Yeah, North Crowley's got to travel all the way across the Metroplex, but it's not freaking like the Jets flying back home from California. They're just going, an hour up the road, down the road or whatever.
By the way, hard drive, Ward. That's a hard drive.
It is a hard drive.
Bridge, that's not easy.
By the way, I had Pat Doney over at North Crowley practice last week, and he got an interesting bite from Coach Gates, where he's talking about, people always talk about how great football is here in DFW, but they're always talking about the D. We talking about the FW. The FW's right here, and he was just going on and on about how he brings the FW to DFW, and he has. I mean, they have turned around what we thought was a substandard performance against Lancaster and put together 2 great ones. Talk to me about how they're going to do against Rockwall.
Yeah, and if you look at that Rockwall game against Louisville, it was one of those dramatic shifts where Louisville was about to score to tie the game potentially. They would have to get a 2-point conversion. Then they fumble it, and then Rockwall is able to basically run out the clock on the last play of the game. They get another touchdown. So you look at it; it's a 2-score game, but it was really not a 2-score game. It's kind of like Plano East John Tyler. All of a sudden, you get a 14-point shift really quickly. Right. That game had like 3 14-point shifts in it. But Rockwall showed that heart, and in 10-6A, not a lot of teams have heart right now. I think just about everybody in that district right now has got a lot of questions except for Rockwall, and Rockwall is down at quarterback. And Rockwall has shown me that they have built up that infrastructure to where they keep fighting. It's that yellow jacket fight never dies, or jacket fight never dies. The JFND, hashtag JFND, for your X.com privilege, if you want to go check out all the hashtags on that. But North Crowley has been a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde at times for me, because, you saw the game against DeSoto. You see the game against Geyer this past week. And again, to me, that makes a little bit more about Geyer than it does about North Crowley. To me, this is a prototypical trap game for North Crowley, because you're on a little bit of a short rest. You've got a Rockwall team that's going to have a rabid home crowd experience there. Rockwall's got a true home crowd experience. And unfortunately for North Crowley, even though they're trying to get the FW and DFW, they don't got the fans. The fans are in the FW. They're not bringing crowds quite yet. So it's going to be empty on on one side of that stadium. It's going to be completely packed on the other side of the stadium. And I think that momentum is going to carry Rockwall for a little bit. Now, to that end, I'm not predicting a Rockwall win. I think the game's going to look a little bit more like the Lancaster game, where it's a 1-2 score game, and maybe Rockwall gets it down to a score at the end. But I don't think it's ever going to be a situation where North Crowley is truly at risk of losing the game. But I think it's going to be a closer game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like we saw against Geyer. So North Crowley, give me them by a touchdown. And I liked last week that they really opened up the offensive playbook. Your guy talking about the fantasy numbers. This is like a rehash of our fantasy numbers because Quentin Gibson just had an incredible week. And it was really Jimerson throwing the ball around. We kind of mentioned that North Crowley, it looked like they figured out the running game. Let's get the passing game going. And they showed us against Denton Geyer 360 yards in the air that they could. A lot of those are yards after catch. That's what Quentin Gibson does great. He's got wheels. You get him a little bubble screen out there in space, and he is gone. But he can also catch the deep ball as well. So I was really impressed that North Crowley showed us that facet of their game against a really good secondary over at Denton Geyer. So I really like this game. It's the game I'm going to, Ward. I told you, I gave you my flow chart last week. I said if Rockwall could pull it off, that looked good. But then if Keller could pull it off, maybe I'd go out there. Well, Keller didn't pull it off. Rockwall did pull it off. So when you're calling folks this week, Ward, put Diggsy's name on there next
Diggsy
to put Diggsy on there for us. I'm not going to have the camera, but I will have all of the insight at Professor Diggs on the Twitter. So if you are bored on Thursday night, come watch me talk about this game and talk about a North Crowley likely 1-2 score win.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also my guy Jason Bott will be there. And you're saying it's going to be a close game. Jason Bott's last 3 games were Forney, Waxahachie, Midlothian, Kimball, DeSoto, North Crowley. He's had to stay to the end of every game he's been to. So you pair that up, looks like and the way you picked him last week for games to keep your eyes on, we kept our eyes on them, and they were good games. Also,
what do we do, Ward? We haze the new guys, right?
Haze the new guys. I know I should be putting them out on some garbage games, but hazing them just means sending them a little further out than you like to go. But I will tell you, Rockwall's one of the few that you got to put in for your own, due to the fact that they do background checks over there. So you're on your own, buddy boy. You can't put me to work this week. They got to do a background check on you. Let's talk about a game in Arlington because I saw Martin last week against Mansfield, and both of those teams were defensively hampered as it was 63-53. Martin, they did come back. It was kind of funny after the first quarter. They were down 28-7, and Coach Reeves gathered everybody over and said, "It can't get any worse than this unless you guys don't play with any effort the rest of the way." And he's just like, "Just think about that. It cannot get any worse." And they actually put up some effort down the second half, but they ended up just, you give up 63. You're not going to win the games more than likely. Talk to me about what you think about this one and who you think may come up out on top.
And this is a potential shovel game for one of the teams. I don't think it's a shovel team for both. Potentially could be a shovel game if Arlington Martin loses this game. But Arlington Martin kind of is the antithesis of Prosper Walnut Grove insofar as they played up so hard and they haven't won any of these games that we just don't know, when they start playing down, where is that going to fall? Are they going to be 40 points better than Arlington Lamar, or all of a sudden maybe Arlington Martin just isn't what we thought they were, and this game gets a lot more competitive? On paper, Arlington Martin should be a big favorite in this, but Arlington Lamar has had 2 straight weeks where they've had head scratchers, and the talent just hasn't performed to the level of that. This kind of has that Cedar Hill Red Oak vibe for me. Like all of a sudden, the team you don't expect, in this case Arlington Lamar would be like Red Oak. They come out of nowhere and maybe pull an upset. But just like those other 2 games, I'm going to be wrong if I'm going to be wrong, and they can make me wrong. But I think Arlington Martin has to be considered the favorite in this game. But I'm looking for style points, and I'm also looking for a little bit of defense because Arlington Lamar has been held to next to nothing the last 2 weeks, 7 and I think 6 the last 2 weeks. So can they get their offense going, or can Arlington Martin continue to highlight the fact that Arlington Lamar is a little bit deficient on the offensive side of the ball? So I'm looking for how it happens. Because right now I've still got Arlington Lamar or Arlington Martin as my number 1 team. But South Grand Prairie, they're knocking right there at the door. They're 2-1, playing some good football right now. So who's going to be number 1? Can Arlington Martin make a case for why they should be? That's what I'm going to be watching for in this game, Ward.
That is a good point about scheduling up. I mean, it's one thing to do it when you're SOC because once you get in district play, you're just going to roll over teams. It's another thing if you're Martin and you go 0-3, and all of a sudden, if you don't win a game like this, now you're 0-4, and you're wondering where you're going to get your confidence from. He's like, "Yeah, thanks, coach. You told us we were playing up in these other games, but now that we lost in district play, now it's the rope's getting a little bit tighter, and I don't really like the feeling of it being around our neck like this." But taking it from another team from their district, it was like 3 years in a row that South Grand Prairie would start off 0-5 and still go on to the playoffs and make it to the postseason. So I don't know. It could be a confidence builder. There's a team in Houston just like that, Klein Collins, and they're in a 9-team district. They played 2 tough teams and got beat. Then they played a district game and got beat. Now they're in another toughest district game. And if that happens, it's like, I don't, where's this confidence going to come from? But Lancaster and Cedar Hill found the confidence and made the playoffs and went 4 rounds deep. So it's how your team is set up and the psyche of each team. Sticking in Arlington, you got another one, Arlington against Haltom. Talk about this game.
This to me is one of those shovel watches because if you can't win this game, you're not going to make the playoffs. Arlington has had a couple of nice wins, showing me, that they beat Mesquite, they beat Weatherford. So these are teams that they should be beating, but they haven't really gone out there and convincingly beat anyone. Haltom, this is kind of a new pairing now. They've been playing basketball together for a little bit, but now we're putting them together in football. Haltom had a nice win over Boswell this past week. But I still think Arlington has got a little bit more athletic prowess than Haltom does. I like Arlington to win, but this is one of those games where Haltom just hasn't really played anybody, and now coming into this district that we know is a little bit weaker, this is a chance for them to shine. I think that they're going to make this game a little bit more competitive than I even think. If I were just going into it on talent, I would say Arlington's a 2-3 score favorite, but I think Arlington's going to have to squeak out a late fourth quarter win and get this win. But I still think Arlington's going to win. But if Haltom can be competitive in this game and get to that 1-score level, then potentially maybe the way that they could be competitive with South Grand Prairie, get above Arlington Lamar, and maybe sneak into a 4th playoff spot by pulling an upset late in the season.
Before we move from Arlington, what do you feel about Bowie in their non-district play so far? And how they might do.
The fact that they lost a Flower Mound, as you know,
a lot of teams do. A lot of teams do. A lot of teams do.
But then losing to Keller all of a sudden, or the fact that Keller has basically got the shovel and they lost to them, and then the fact that they were non-competitive against Coppell. This looks to be one of my whiffs this year. I thought Arlington Bowie was going to be a state-ranked team and right there, but they just haven't found the depth. They haven't found the continuity. So I think very much Arlington Bowie is right there with Arlington, Haltom, and Lamar as a team to you have to keep an eye on them. Are they going to make the playoffs? Or are they not going to make the playoffs? Right now, I think you have a solid top 2 in South Grand Prairie and Arlington Martin. But if you remember, Ward, I thought it was going to be Arlington Bowie and Arlington Martin as your top 2. That gets back to what we were talking about with Arlington Martin. Now they played up so much. How are they going to fit into this district? And that's what we want to see this week.
Yeah, they have proven they can score points, but just like the coach said, in the preseason, they're worried about their defense, and it looks like he had a right to be worried about it. How competitive is this game going to be? South Lake Carroll against Trinity. Trinity's another team having trouble with their defense, but they can also score. Like it's kind of similar to Bowie, except now they're in a team. They're playing teams like South Lake Carroll and Byron Nelson. So talk about this one.
These two names, you can just evoke memories of 60,000 at Texas Stadium, and that's a bigger crowd than the Cowboys and the Commanders would get right now with what they're putting out there these days. But you got Carroll and Trinity. I mean, it is the run game that is going to determine that. But the fact that South Lake Carroll has a defense and Euless Trinity doesn't have a defense, that just to me tells me everything I want to know about this game. I think South Lake is going to put it on Trinity. I think South Lake is going to beat them worse than they beat Byron Nelson. But to me, I'm sure South Lake Carroll feels like this too. The schedule makers didn't do them any favors, getting Byron Nelson and Trinity right here in week 3 and week 4, because the rest of the year, it's just going to be working on things until the playoffs start. It's kind of what South Oak Cliff has to go through in their scheduling, which we have now deemed the South Oak Cliff theory. South Lake Carroll probably needed to go to the South Oak Cliff theory and maybe schedule a little bit harder in non-district, because I don't think they got ready ready for much of anything, playing Hebron and Midland out for their two non-district games because you had two kind of weak non-district games and you have two strong district games, and then the rest of the district is not going to be strong. But Carroll's going to look good. Carroll's looking good early. I think Southlake Carroll's going to win this game by at least 3 scores. Do you want to give them 4 scores? I know you don't like going higher than 28, Ward.
Well, I don't mean to get Abraham Lincoln on you, but I'll say 4 score on that one. Although it should also be a fairly quick game, which is why maybe Pat Doney picked it to go to, because he'll be able to, and he lives around that area, so he'll be home by 9:15. Oh no, he's got a 10:15 live shot. Never mind. He won't be home anytime by then. Hey, let's go over.
He's gonna be bored then, just sitting there, kind of waiting for the game to end, and
yeah, wondering what's going on. But
maybe working on the forecast.
He better hope the lights aren't cut off by the time his live shot ends. Is the main thing. What about this game up in 6-6A? You got Rock Hill heading up against your Flower Boys from Princeton.
It's a calibration game for me personally, for a calibration game for Digsy, because we got 3 teams, and I think now 4 teams, given that we saw McKinney and Plano play to a 2-point game, that are going to be competitive for 2 spots. So now we're going to start getting into some score comparisons, because last year, Wizzy, it was this past week last year that Rock Hill just took Plano East out to the woodshed and beat them down. It was 42-0 at one point in that game before Plano East got a couple of fourth quarter touchdowns to make the score a little bit more respectable. Now, under no circumstance do I think that Princeton is going to win this game. I don't got this on upset watch. I got it on calibration watch. But if Rock Hill goes 53-0 on them or 53-7 on them or something like that, I think it kind of installs Rock Hill as a top favorite for a 3 or 4 spot. But if this game is kind of like the Plano East game, it's 2-3 scores, Princeton is able to have some offensive success against Rock Hill, I think that could tell you how competitive the middle of 6-6A could be. Because Rock Hill has looked great and they've looked bad. They've had 2 games where they've been held to single digits in point scores, but then they play Sherman and they look like, okay, they got the offense figured out. But it's Sherman. And I think Princeton is a little bit higher level than Sherman when it comes to that. So what can Rock Hill's somewhat anemic offense do against an average to below average defense? Can they get it going? And can their defense stop an efficient Princeton offense? That's going to be a fun game to watch. Rock Hill is the favorite in this game, but how do they win this game, Ward? We need style points. That's what I'm checking in for on this one.
Let's check in on that one. All right, let's go to 11-6A, Duncanville hosting Waxahachie. The Indians continue their torrid beginning schedule after NSA took Capel to overtime. Forney game was wonderful. Then they got Duncanville, then DeSoto. Then they finally get to rest up and figure out where they are and take a look back. But Duncanville's coming off that great come-from-behind win where Keelan Russell kind of he threw that pick, and it looked bad for them, but he brought them back and got them a big win to go over a national power, St. Francis, on Saturday night. Your thoughts on this game, and what are you kind of looking for in this game?
Yeah, same thing I'm kind of looking for in the other couple of games I've talked about. We got a pretty solid favorite. Duncanville is going to be favored over Waxahachie. This is a real proving ground game for Waxahachie. How do they look against the best teams in the state? How is their defense going to hold up? How is their offense? How is that quarterback, Jerry Meyer, going to look against an elite defense? Because I'll tell you, Ward, and kind of poking in on the Duncanville game at times, and I get that the Maryland team is a state national powerhouse. They play a national schedule, so it's kind of hard to calibrate. But when I was watching them, I didn't see anything completely special out of that team, and Duncanville didn't look great at times either. And that's kind of the second game because Duncanville didn't play the first game. The game against South Oak Cliff, they didn't look great at times, and we just saw what South Oak Cliff did. They used that to parlay into a big win against Longview. So what can Waxahachie do? Because Waxahachie did not show a lot of good running defense against JV and Osborne was able to get some yardage for Forney, and they put up a lot of points, but they were able to slow their offense, their passing game down significantly, and that's where Duncanville has been pretty good so far this year, but the Duncanville running game has been a little bit suspect right now. So what does it look like when Waxahachie is taking on that giant offensive line, really good skill athletes? Can that defense slow down the really good athletes on the edges? I don't think so. But again, for me, Waxahachie, can they earn that street cred, or is it when they play the big kids on the block? Is it going to be back to 35-7? I think it is. I think it's going to be back to the 35-7 kind of games. But again, Waxahachie has installed themselves very nicely. I was wrong about them by saying they're going to lose at 35-7 to Duncanville. I'm not absolving myself or see you lost to Duncanville kind of a thing. They have overachieved past my expectations. Jerry Meyer has been great. The wide receiver over there, I think his name is Coben, has looked great as well. 300 yards. Cohen
Brown.
Cohen Brown, almost 300 yards in that game. Cohen, he's scoring touchdowns is what he's doing. He's putting up big yards. I'm not going to take him as a bounce back from my fantasy, but on the right week, he looks like somebody I want to take on a fantasy pick because he's playing great. Jerry Meyer is flinging it out there, getting the ball to the edges. Waxahachie is showing great speed. But I want to see their defense because their defense has kind of had two questionable games now because they lost a fourth quarter lead against Coppell, and then they gave up 34 with having a really good secondary performance against Forney. And Forney's weakness right now is their offensive line. They're banged up on their offensive line. They got some new kids. They're trying to plug holes there. And Javian Osborne, he's a D1, top running back in the state, but the holes aren't being open for him. It's him doing all of that work. So what are they going to do when they're playing a great offensive line and maybe the running back isn't the skill that Javian Osborne is, but can they stop and limit that, or is Duncanville going to gash? I think Duncanville is going to gash. I think they're going to win. But yet again, Waxahachie this year has made a point. They love clipping this podcast and proving us wrong each and every week, Ward. So we'll find out what they're going to do to make us look dumb this week.
Yeah.
Indian salute.
They're going to clip the part where you say that they don't have a solid running back. Wade Lemons is going to be like, wait a second. Don't talk to me like that. All right, let's move on to a
when life gives you lemons.
Score touchdowns, right? We're moving on to Fulshear against Burleson Centennial. This game is going to be played in Hutto. Fulshear's in my other show's domain in the Houston area, and the coaches and the state's media have really fallen in love with this squad. You realize why, because they got a three-headed running attack with their quarterback and two running backs. They tear up yardage. They beat the solid teams down in Houston. I don't think they're going to have any problem with Burleson Centennial, to be honest with you. I mean, yes, they were both 5A teams last year, but Fulshear was playing with 6A numbers. And now they're in 6A and they're beating solid 6A teams like Ridgepoint and down in Ridgepoint. I just think this is a game where Fulshear keeps Burleson Centennial's losing streak going to 2 games.
I just like when you get to talk about Houston, Ward. We get a little bit of your pearls of wisdom here, instead of the shovels and all the digging I'm doing. We need the wisdom sometimes, and I know you know a little bit about Fulshear. I honestly couldn't have told you a little bit about Fulshear at all. In fact, I started looking at some of the computer polls and some of the computer models, and I didn't even realize, I guess they're just right below Summer Creek and North Shore and Tascasita in the computer rankings anyway. What are they in our Houston inside rankings?
They're at 4 there, too. They're right behind those 3. There. Yep. Ahead of Katy, so that got to give you something, because Katy usually gets the not very observant vote. They're like, oh, well, Katie's there, so I'm going to throw them up there. But no, the Fulshear's jumped past them. They're up to 4.
So when you're basically playing a team that's going to be on the level of a Southlake Carroll or a Denton Geyer in that range, Burleson Centennial is not going to be competitive at all in this game. We may have to get the towel out there. You guys got are you sending a camera crew out to Hutto for this one for the Houston show? Because I know we're not going to want it on the Dallas show.
No, we're not sending it anyway. We're going to give them a rest. We've had them on 2 out of the 3 weeks.
Are you going to do any wheeling and dealing with the Valleys? Maybe do a little bit of a trade.
If they
show a little Henderson Gainesville for Fulshear Burleson Centennial.
That's a good point. I forgot. By the way, Neil Beasley will be out there. I don't know if you knew that or not. I think I might have told you that when we'll get to that in a little bit. But no, I don't think so. And Fulshear, this is what I think this is their last non-district game, and they are in a district comparable to 8-7 or 9-6A. So they're not, and they're that much better. So we're done being competitive here from here on out until the playoffs start for Fulshear. We're probably done.
So they should pick the better 4th game. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. That's exactly what they should have done. All right, let's move on to another team with two teams that I've seen before, and their quarterback was down at Timberview when they played Denton Ryan, but still that Denton Ryan was a heck of a defense. Colleyville Heritage, I left that game against Red Oak with a sour taste in my mouth. They did pull off a win last week, but talk about who you think is going to come out on top and what you're looking for out of this one.
Timberview and Argyle, if my memory of the Dallas Morning News was correct, was like 0-0 at halftime. And that's one thing that Timberview has consistently done, has been that their defense has been great. And that's kind of what we were looking at with they have two D1 players on their defense, that was really going to be the stabilizing force for Timberview. And Colleyville Heritage has had problems when they've had a defense that's a little bit more than bad at times. So to me, this is a great matchup. What's going to take place? Colleyville Heritage's high-powered offense or Timberview's defense. I think this is going to be a slugfest, Ward. But I think Colleyville Heritage is going to pull out like a 21-10 sort of win, where we're probably going to have under 35 total points in this game, because I think Colleyville Heritage is going to have a hard time scoring, because the Colony, which they scored a lot of points on, their defense has always been suspect. So Colleyville Heritage in the matchups was able to take advantage of that. But now how's Colleyville Heritage going to score points on a really good defense? The problem with Timberview is they have a hard time scoring on just about anybody right now. So I think Timberview may get a late score, but Colleyville Heritage, who also has a defensive presence, their coach is very defensive minded, even though Colleyville Heritage is known for their high powered offense. I think that Colleyville Heritage will pull it out. But Timberview, man, if they get a pick six or something, which we've seen Colleyville Heritage susceptible to some of those turnover errors, that's Timberview's pathway to get in this game. Get a pick six or something, and all of a sudden that 21-10 is now 17-14 because of a 14-point turnaround like that. So that to me gives me hope that Timberview could win this game. But I think Colleyville Heritage will play good enough to eke out a defensive victory. Gotcha.
Let's move on to Lancaster against Mesquite Horn. We had them in at 4. Now that 4-5 range is, we're still feeling good about Wax at 3 or making it somehow. That 4-5 range is now Lancaster and Cedar Hill, and now maybe Mesquite Horn jumps up if whatever happens in this game.
What about Skyline? I mean,
Skyline
we've
too.
seen 4 teams
that's right.
Completely jumping up for this.
It's the second time the second time you had to correct me on Skyline. They're going to hate me over there. I'm sorry.
You don't like that Skyline chili over there, Ward. Man, you gotta give some love to those Raiders and Skyline. But is it a case where Lancaster is not as good as we thought they were, or is it a case where Hebron may be a little bit better than we thought they were? Because we've seen the potential of Lancaster against North Crowley, and then we saw the potential of Lancaster against Aledo, and even in that Hebron game, they were going for 2 to win the game. A kind of a suspect play call there, but Hebron at times. I mean, I remember you saying in that first quarter against Southlake, okay, I'm seeing something. They just couldn't figure it out. So that could be a little bit more about what we are seeing in Hebron more than anything about Lancaster. But if they lose this game, they're done. I mean, this is basically a shovel game because whoever loses this game, it's going to take too much, because we're talking about having to do 2 things that you're not expected to do if you lose this game. Well, when those 2 things get into Duncanville and DeSoto range, it makes it way harder to get to do something you weren't expected to do. So we got shovel watch, but you got Mesquite Horn who's coming in on a high. You've got Lancaster who is over scheduled. Maybe they took South Oak Cliff Theory to heart. Maybe they shouldn't have been doing South Oak Cliff Theory to heart. But I just think Lancaster still has too much talent. I don't see any quit in them. So I think Lancaster is going to get a little bit of a measure of breath in this game. I think they're going to win this game by half of an Abraham Lincoln speech. I'm going to give them 2 score. 2
score, and here we go. Is this one a shovel watch game? I mean, we got Skyline against Cedar Hill.
It's a shovel watch game yet, but given how we expected Cedar Hill to come into the season, and then given how Cedar Hill played against Midlothian, given how Cedar Hill for a half looked good against Allen, what Cedar Hill is going to show up in this game? I think, given now that we have a game and a half of they look good, and a game and a half consecutively where they look bad, and we have Skyline now. We're after week 3, let's kind of get a little bit of Houston calibration. Where would you put Fort Bend Marshall? Because they looked horrible against Fort Bend Marshall, and now all of a sudden they look great against Crowley, a DFW area team, when Crowley looked good against North Shore. So where does our calibration piece fit into all of this?
That's a good point. And you got to remember that North Shore game, somehow they pulled off 5 picks against it's a Division I quarterback there. At least he was a Division I quarterback till he got his knee hurt. Somehow they got 5 picks and still lost by two scores. But Marshall was they're a 3-round deep 5A team. But that's, again, they're 5A. They don't have the numbers here. So you have that. And then, of course, I mean, if North Shore played Fort Bend Marshall, North Shore wins by 3 scores at least. I mean, their athletes are better than their athletes. So that's where you are with that. This is I would throw a shovel on this one, but that's your call on that one.
The fact that you can still lose this game and maybe beat Waxahachie and maybe beat Lancaster. That's why I think you have a chance to continue even if you lose this game. Right now, this is 5-6 for me. I've got Cedar Hill 5, Skyline 6, which should theoretically make it in shovel watch, but given the talent that both of these teams have and the fact that, if Waxahachie and Lancaster both maybe one injury away from all of a sudden, I don't know if they have the depth that some of these other teams have. Cedar Hill has just been disappointing. So I'm going to take a little bit. I think it's still an upset, even though I've got Skyline ranked over Cedar Hill right now. But I'm taking Skyline over Cedar Hill. And I still think, given what Cedar Hill's potential ceiling is, it is an upset. But if Cedar Hill loses this game, man, it's going to be really hard for them to get in at that point.
It will be difficult. All right, let's move on to what we have as our game of the week. Because Lovejoy finally decided not to play super tough teams, and they put, 76 on Liberty. That may be even a little less than an easier game. And then Anna, they had the week off. They got 2 weeks to prepare for whatever Todd Dodge is going to throw at them. What do you think about this one? Does the fact that it's at Anna make any difference to you?
I don't think it does as far as that goes. Anna doesn't have yet a home field experience. I know they're trying to do that. They've got, they all walk in over this bridge and they're trying to create it, but it's a middle school stadium more than, I mean, it's kind of like the old Allen Stadium that we used to affectionately call the double wide. We talked about it a couple of weeks where it was our political commentary, pass those bond elections. Well, Anna hasn't been listening to us about passing some bond elections. Maybe they will after listening to our podcast. So put us up on the big screen. Well, they don't even have a big screen, Ward, so they're going to have to maybe get one of those blow-up projectors. Yeah. Everybody hold their phones up and try to figure that out. There's 2 things that I'm really considering in this game that are kind of why I'm leaning toward Lovejoy. First of all, Anna has had 2 games where they haven't really played anybody to tell us anything DFW-wise. The Tennessee game, what does that really tell us? They lost that game, and they lost it late. And then beating Gunter, you were right about that over me, Ward, because Salina beat Gunter pretty handily. It wasn't very competitive at all. So what does that tell us? That Anna did the same thing? Anna pulled off the brakes a little quicker than Salina did. So, they got some second-team scores when it came to that. All of that, by the way, is very good for Gunter. Gunter went to a coaching clinic. They went to the South Oak Cliff Theory, and they said, sign us up. Let's take our lumps because we got to look at week 16 and week 17 instead of looking at week 6 to 10. So Gunter got exactly what they wanted out of that, and they're going to be better for it. But Anna, I don't know if they're going to be better for what they have done. And then getting the week 3 bye, that's kind of just bad luck on their part. Yes, you get 2 weeks to prepare, but right now Anna needs reps. Anna needs reps against big 5A Division II schools because they haven't played a 5A Division II school yet in football. Ever, basically. They played Walnut Grove last year, but that was Walnut Grove as an outlaw schedule. They're going to get to see Walnut Grove again to find out if that score calibrates or not. So I think Lovejoy now having 3 weeks of practice, they got to see Highland Park. They got to get better against Frisco Liberty, where they kind of got to work out and see some offensive production. I think they are primed to take care of Anna. It's going to be a shootout for sure, but I think Lovejoy is going to win like a 42-38 kind of a game.
And after this one, Anna gets to head to Melissa. So I guess it's better that if they have the bye, they're not playing Liberty next. They're playing somebody that they can actually sit around and prepare for. Maybe they did some Melissa preparation too. Who knows? Let's get into some small schools. Before we start on Carter versus Wilmer Hutchins, it's been a while since I had been to the South Dallas Super Bowl, which I got to go to last Saturday because of the fact that they moved it to 10:30. Usually they have it at 6 so they have a whole day of celebration and cookouts and all sorts of stuff. and I can't go to it because we're taping the show then. But I just really love the environment, at least outside. Once you get in the stadium, they're not really paying much attention to the game, but the festivities outside are awesome. I loved it. And Lincoln came out on top. They won by like 30 points. They certainly were the better squad in that game, but it's all about the atmosphere there. So they got themselves a Super Bowl ring, which my Commanders haven't gotten in 20 some odd years. But let's talk about Carter and Wilmer Hutchins. What you think about this 4A clash?
Wilmer Hutchins last year, they were one of those teams. They were in that district with Panther Creek and Salina and Carter when those two districts were merged before all the 5A schools moved down to give DISD their own district. And Wilmer Hutchins really impressed me at times. And they impressed me with three really talented sophomores that are now juniors that really made up the core of their foundation. Carter is a team that has kind of tried to get into South Oak Cliff theory and play up the last 3 weeks. Well, it hasn't worked out. They're 0-3. So they're looking for a win, whereas you got Wilmer Hutchins, who is playing great football right now. I think Carter is still big brother. Wilmer Hutchins is a little brother. But I think this could be this game is an upset watch for me, but I think Carter is going to find a way to eke out a one-score win in this game. But this is one of those games that is a really fun game. You got Wilmer Hutchins, who is 3-0. You got Carter, who is 0-3. Wilmer Hutchins beat Spruce up pretty badly. You got Carter that played competitive against Longview Pine Tree, but just couldn't find out. And Carter has been playing competitive in these games. He played competitive against Van as well. So I think Carter's just got a little bit more talent than Wilmer Hutchins. But man, Wilmer Hutchins is going to be coming into this game on a high with a lot of confidence. And I think the atmosphere for this game is going to be fantastic as well.
Awesome. At the beginning of the year, when we picked this one as one of our country road games, Henderson versus Gainesville, I just went by the name Henderson, and I was thinking, okay, this East Texas team going to come in here and do some things. But as we're coming up to this game that's going to be at Texas A&M Commerce, this looks a little bit more competitive than I may have first thought, and Neil Beasley might get in for a treat. Am I right on that?
I don't know. I mean, Gainesville has really not played up to their expectations this year. So I feel like you got two teams that are trying to struggle to figure themselves out. A beautiful neutral site game. I think Henderson's going to be the favorite in this one. But if you live out in that area, if you live out in Greenville or Celeste, and you want to go see Neil Beasley loves the fans. You can go say hi to him. It's going to be a fun atmosphere. Texas A&M Commerce puts on a good production of a game. They've got a really nice stadium out there. So it's going to be fun. I like the fact that they did a little bit of a neutral site game. We may see that again one other time here, a little bit of a neutral site game. I think Henderson should be considered the favorite in this game. That's more of what Gainesville hasn't done more than what Henderson has done, because Gainesville, it's not looking good, Ward. Not looking good.
Looking good. Right, well, we'll see how it turns out. They always come up with good highlights for us. You may have sold me on this tip. Mineral Wells, we've got a caller from Mineral Wells that calls every week wondering why they're not on the show. And I'm just like, man, it's just too far out for us to get. But now I don't have an excuse. It's at Choctaw Thursday night. Tell me about how Mineral Wells with Preston Harrison, the big tight end, is going to do in this game against Ford.
Yeah, Quinlan Ford is a team that has kind of struggled this year. I gave them a little bit of higher expectations versus Mineral Wells. They've looked really good so far this year. They're playing a lot with a lot of fire. They've got really good coaching staff over there. I think Mineral Wells is taking that next step right now, and in their district, they need to take a next step because it's a very competitive district with the Brocks of the world that they have to figure out, and with Brock and Graham, and even now one of my teams that I'm adopting a little bit is Eagle Mountain. Eagle Mountain beating Paradise after being competitive with Grandview. So Mineral Wells needs to make a statement, and I think they will in this game. Quinlan Ford, like I said, they've had a little bit of a couple of head scratchers so far. They were 2-0 coming into this game against Spring Hill this past week. So they're getting some winning, but I think Mineral Wells is winning against higher quality teams. And when you've got that, the fact that they're going to be 3-0 going into this game, you look at the records and you're like, okay, the very competitive game. I think Mineral Wells has been doing it against better teams. So I'm taking Mineral Wells in this game.
Gotcha. What's Quinlan Ford's mascot, by the way? Or
I think
did
they're the
get you
Panthers.
as I see you typing? Panthers.
I think they're the
Okay.
Panthers.
Well, I was just checking.
The four Panthers.
We don't
Let's
know.
find out.
It could
What
be.
does Google say?
I didn't check Google, but let's figure out
They're
while
the
you're
Panthers.
figuring that out.
There
They
you
are
go.
the Panthers. It's time to take a look at our weekly fantasy game.
We could just skip this part where we don't need to talk about fantasy. I think we need to give the listener a break because they don't care about this segment. They don't want to know what's happening.
They want to know how we're doing in that. I mean, people care. They care about us and know if we know what we're doing. It seems like one of us knows what he's doing, at least this week. And again, I'm going to tell you, I may have beat you by 380 points, whatever it is, 385. I stacked the deck, and I told you last week I was going to stack the deck. I picked a quarterback that also runs in Eddie Griffin, and that's exactly what he did. What did he get? So 284 of my points. I picked a red-hot receiver in Quentin Gibson. He got 247 points for me. And then Kellikippy over at Marcus got me 65 points as he was running all over the place. I stacked the deck. There's nothing we can say about that, and I can't go back to these players. So I just want to make sure at one point in this whole fantasy little game that we're playing here that I would have a lead over you. And this is the week 3. I got a 2-1. You're 1-2. There. I got my lead. Will I be able to hang on to it? I don't know. So let's see.
Anything like our pick 'em with Gossett, you won't hold on to it very long.
I won't hold on to it. No, I lose that one real quick.
By the way, I go back just to say that that I did a little bit of just double checking myself. Quinlan Ford is also 3-0. They did beat Spring Hill, but they didn't give me the style points. It was 35-34. I had them like a 2-score favorite. So that I'm just not seeing a lot of confidence right now in Quinlan Ford, even though they're 3-0. I just think Mineral Wells is a different kind of 3-0, and just like you're a different kind of 2-1 right now, and you're about to find out what's going to happen when you go to 2-2. But I've got some justifications and things, so we'll see what you got on the slideshow here.
Slideshow. Let's start off with your quarterback because last week you did the homer section with Jackson Hayes. I hope you don't go homer again this week. Maybe you will. Who knows? But quarterback, you chose Lovejoy because you just said that was going to be a scoring machine there. So Jacob Janasek is your guy. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a homer pick because Lovejoy is just, you can go out the other side of my window. You can throw a rock to Plano East on one side and throw a rock to Lucas on the other side. But I do think this is going to be a shootout. I remember, Ward, if you remember that Argyle Lovejoy game a couple of years ago,
yeah.
It's like 42-42 at halftime, and you were just tired. You're like, I can't do this. Too old for this kind of a stuff. That's what you're going to see in the higher tier games when you got Melissa, Walnut Grove, and Emerson doesn't have the ability to go score for score, but Lovejoy and Anna absolutely do have offensive talent, and the defense is question marks. So because I think you're going to have to score a lot in this game, I'm going to go with him to take care of business. My pick last week was smart, but unfortunately the running game was just really too good to pass up with. And now we've got the Plano East running back who is the number 1 running back in the area because they fed him the ball. So maybe we'll consider that when we come on. But I think Lovejoy doesn't have a running game, so that's something we have to consider in our passing. Is who's got a running game, who's got a passing game, who doesn't focus on their running game at times. I think that's Lovejoy this week. So give me Jacob Janasek to give me that 300 that I've been looking for so far in the quarterback position.
That's a good point. Yeah, you got 300 last week for your whole entire team. But true. I can't say anything. That's what happened to me in my first 2 weeks. That I was actually debating between DeAndre Williams because of that same fact, because he can run and throw. But, man, I'm still trying to live off of Quentin Gibson. So I picked Chris Jimerson Jr. In their last game where he will play a whole game for a little while. I mean, he'll probably play a whole game against some of these teams in 3-6-8, but he'll be out there against Rockwall throwing and running, and hopefully I can double dip with him again like I did with Eddie Griffin. I'm probably not going to get as many points, but hopefully get me around 250, and then I can bank on running backs to do the rest of receivers. So I'm going with Chris Jimerson Jr. at North Crowley.
That's a good pick, but unfortunately, you don't know on any given week. Are they going to go with the running game or are they going to go with the passing game? So we might be back to the running game, which you'll get some running yards out of them. But, you got some really good running backs. You're probably saying to Coach Gates, feed me your barbecue and feed me the ball this week. Right. And how do you take a crowd out of a home game? running the ball. So we'll find out what happens
Run
this
them
week. But
down.
that is a top tier talent, Ward. Can't deny that.
Yeah, you got Daniel Bray over there saying, "Hey, I came in here from Abilene. I didn't come here to see no quitting. Catch passes. Hand me that rock, and stop giving it to Cornelius." All right, running back position. Oh, there he is. God bless it. Travis Agee is in there for Plano East. You told me he's the best runner in the town, and they're going up against Plano West. Is he going to play a whole game? I don't know, but you think he is. Talk to me about this pick.
I mean, he may not play a whole game, but what we found in Princeton in the second half is when they got up comfortably, what they do? They just ran the ball to run the clock. So I think we're going to see a little bit of that again this week. So I think he's going to get fed. I think against Plano West Forest defense, you might see his first 8 carries go for 200 yards. He's got good breakaway speed. I think he's good for another 200 yards. And the coaching staff and offensive scheme for 3 weeks has shown they're going to feed him the ball. I think they're going to feed him the ball again.
Well, I'm using a similar strategy with me. I think they're going to get up big over here in West Mesquite, and I'm going to pick Demarius Robinson to just kind of run, and run out the clock and get him a victory as they start district play over there. My goal for him is get up over 150. I used to say get touchdowns, but I forgot you said touchdowns don't count for nothing. But
we don't care about touchdowns, Lizzie.
That's my goal is big yards from the big man over there.
My Rockwall guy got me some touchdowns, but doesn't count.
Didn't count it, did we? Nope. All right, let's move to receiver. And this guy used to not be receiver, but he's playing both ways now. You picked him for Panther Creek. Jalen Lott, talk about it.
Yeah, this is a game that Panther Creek has to be competitive. I believe they play Kennedale this week. Kennedale or Alvarado, one of those two, but it's still a good team. And what I'm seeing with them is they're targeting him. He has 27 targets through the first 3 games. So when you're getting 9 or 10, he's kind of filling in that role that Trickett did last year, where you just got to get somebody a high octane, get him the ball. It looks like it's Jalen Lott right now. So with his speed, if he's going to touch the ball 10 times, I'll take my chances with that. And none of the other guys seem to be getting a lot of touches. So I think they're going to continue to feed him and give me those points this week.
Well, I'm going with Jacoby Hayes. And the reason why is obviously it's something I just saw last Friday him play. He scored 3 touchdowns in that game. And that second touchdown, he looked right in my camera and he said, "Y'all going to remember my name." And when it came to making picks, the name I remembered was Jacoby Hayes. And then he's going down to Midway to play on Thursday. Actually, I think that's a home game for them or a neutral site game. But either way, I remember him against the game against Summit last year. He had a huge game there, a huge game last week. He's up in the rankings or up in the statistical leaders for wide receiver. I'm just big on Jacoby Hayes. I'm banking on him to get me some big points this week. And I'm going to need it because it looks like I kind of like the way your team is stacked up. So this is going to be a difficult one, but I'm hoping to keep this winning streak, move it up to 3.
This represents the difference in personality between you and I, Wizzy, because when you get remember the name, you probably think of Fort Minor, you probably think of a little hip hop here and there, and yeah. I think of trying to get the name. I think of David Allen Coe because you never even called me by my name. I got those country roads down, whereas you're representing the hip hop community and remember the name of Fort Minor or whatever. I can't even name the band that sings that song, but either way, it's a solid pick for you as well. But I think I'm going to bounce back this week and take care of business, kind of like I did on the Pick'ems this week, Wizzy.
Oh, Pick'ems. Where are you going to be?
By the way, they played Kennedale.
Yeah, it was Kennedale.
I'm fact checking myself. It is Kennedale.
Well, I think you already told us where you're going to be this week, right? You said Rockwall and then obviously Plano East. So there's no game Saturday you might want to look at or no?
Anyway.
I got you. I'll be at, I think I'm going to go from Choctaw up to Arlington, Seguin, see them play Grapevine. And then Friday, I told you I'm at Lovejoy, Anna, for that whole game. I haven't been to Anna's football stadium unless I was there for a story, but I haven't shot a game there. So I will be, I'm looking for a competitive game, but I don't want to see my fantasy points go all heck right in front of me like that. That would get me depressed if all of a sudden.
What you need to do, I know you don't know Alonzo, you don't talk to Alonzo, but if anybody can get you VIP parking in Anna, it's Alonzo. So Alonzo, contact Wizzy somehow.
That's it.
Ward at WeAreGameDay.com and get him some VIP parking. Show your Anna medal. right there. Because Wizzy don't
Exactly.
do
When
that.
you see me roaming
I
around
have
the
to park
sidelines.
on the side of the street ditch stuff. He don't do that.
Yeah. I don't do that Highland Park stuff. You put me somewhere. I'll be there for the whole game. What kind of food you got for me too? I gotta know that too. A lot of stuff I gotta know. Alonzo, find me, man. Find me and bring me something to eat while we're at the game because I likes to eat. All right, Diggsy. I appreciate it. We're gonna my fly just got me. Where'd that come from? Boy, oh
You're pretty
boy.
fly for a white guy.
Oh, brother. Now I'm definitely gonna hang up on you. A little offspring? No way. All right, brother. We will talk again next week as we get to week 5 next week. Talk to you later, man.
We're halfway to basketball season.
No, brother.
Who
Not
knew?
really. All right, Diggs.